All right, what's good? I'm going to finish my little conversation on Afrofuturism and Africa, or just thinking from an African perspective and a non-African American perspective. I dropped some real important things on my last post, but really, I just want to expand on it a little bit. What I was talking about is like Afrocentricity, which is different than, we always heard of Afrocentricity, and we changed that up because we don't want to say Afro, because that's not a continent. There's no place called Africa, right? We say Africa because it's an I after the R, right? So it's Africentricity. Africentric, okay? We say that because we want to own it. We don't want to say Afro because, sure, we know Eurocentrism is seeing the world through European eyes. Africentrism is seeing the world through African eyes, and we have to say that there's shades to even African eyes, because how Africans who have been victimized and kidnapped by Europeans in England may see the world differently than Africans kidnapped by Europeans in the Americas, either North America, Central, South America, or even the Caribbean. And even in the Caribbean and South America, sometimes it depends on which Europeans, kidnapped you, whether it was the French or the Spanish or the English, or even the Portuguese in the Brazil area. And with that, we're all trying to see the world as Africans through an African viewpoint, okay? However, the experiences that we had from wherever we are also lay on us from that viewpoint. So whether we're writing Sword and Soul, that may take on a different view if it is from, say, I'm going to mess it up, but the publishers of, say, Malika, right, that just came out on Halloween Comic Book Day, may see it different than Milton Davis, right, out of Atlanta. Okay, the writers of Malika are from Nigeria. The brother lives in Baltimore. I can't remember his name. He's gonna kill me, but I'm giving him a shout out anyway. He did Malika. He also did the Wind Chaser, the Wind Master. Anyway, those are two African warrior comic books, right? But they both come from out of the mind of an African from Nigeria who lives in America, so there may be some American experience, you know what I'm saying, like Akon, different from Barack Obama. I don't know how he has such a non-African experience, but I know the Akon, even though he was born here in New Orleans, he still has a very African mentality, and he sees things as an African, probably even more than he sees as an African American, but he understands that. I think this brother who did Malika has the same thing. But when you have somebody like Milton Davis, is an African American writer out of Atlanta, he writes Sword and Soul, and a lot of his stories, very much like Charles Saunders, who's a pioneer of Sword and Soul, take on a different viewpoint than, say, Malika, or who is fighting Chinese invaders, right? Chinese warriors. Milton's are stories that are they're both very historically accurate, or historical fictions. So there's a taint of difference. When it talks, so you would have to check them out. But again, they deal with magic. And I read Charles Saunders too, so I'm gonna throw him in there. Is not a black Tarzan, so don't get that twisted. These are stories of warriors that are experiencing things within the context of African history. Why is that important to us? Well, again, we are reclaiming all of that, and we're living all this stuff out in our fictional books. how does that roll into Afrofuturism? Why did I mention, how we see the past? Because again, how we see the past and how we see the present determines on how we're going to see the future. Okay? I'm going to go back to that meter, right? So when it comes to Afrofuturism or Afrifuturism, which I probably like the term better, it also goes on, a little bit of where you come from. What do you see? And I think, some of the blowback that we've been getting is that, African Americans, Africans in the diaspora see, have a hard time sometimes, even I'm going to say myself, seeing things through a Africentric viewpoint. We've been given such a Eurocentric viewpoint. It's more than just, I used to say, it's hard to imagine or write a dystopian future when you live in a dystopian reality, right? That used to be my cover for us not writing about dystopian futures. You understand what I'm saying? But I think it goes beyond that. I think we come from what we feel like, or at least I feel like. I'm an African romanticist. I'll take that term, Hotep. People want to use it derogatory, but I do have a romantic review, a romantic view of Africa, okay? Traditional Africa, ancient Africa, whatever you ever want to call it. To me, that's like a utopia, okay? So for people like me, Africa was a utopia to me. So writing a utopian future is possible, but some African Americans like me, including, even though I see Africa as a utopia, or at least pre-colonial Africa, pre-invaders in Egypt Africa, when we was by ourselves Africa, right? That's a utopia, right? Probably like those South Pacific Islanders that shot my man with the arrow. Their world, until we go there and invade it or whatever, is a utopia. It's so hot they don't need to develop technology. It's so hot they don't need to develop football and other games. They are amused and satisfied with the world the way they've seen it, and they've developed it, and they don't need to change for any kind of years. Forever. They're happy. They've learned to live. It's like, our animals. Our animals ain't trying to build no technology because they found a way to live with what they are already given. So again, boom. So for me, I'm all over the place. I'm going to try to bring it back. But when it comes to viewing our future as an African American, this Eurocentric view of not just invaders coming from space and doing to Earth what Columbus, Magellan, and America's Vespucci and Cortez and all these others did to parts of the world that they visited, but just viewing a non-industrialized future, okay? I know there's problems writing drama in a utopia because a utopia is supposed to be perfect. So even when you write in like Ta-Nehisi Coates did, Black Panther, he immediately destroyed Wakanda, which was a utopia, and had there become trouble in paradise. Kind of a reason why I didn't really like the book that much. But, it's hard to write in a utopia. But despite all of that, forget the utopia. Whether it's problems in the future world that you design or not, the problem or the challenge of writing without a Western view of technology is a problem. And that's what this brother Vernon opened up. It's something that I was already preparing to write about, but I didn't write an article on it, and I didn't do a blog on it really. So I had already started preparing the story in the direction that I was going to go, based on some racism that some writers gave, David Weber and John Ringo gave in the military science fiction world, in terms of things that they said about black warriors, all right, and black soldiers, and diversity in war, right? But he brings this different view of technology, and it challenged me to think of a organic, earth-friendly form of technology. And I'm like, yo, that is amazing. And I hear people do and not do it as magic, right? So I hear people talking all the time, on the post. Oh yes, well, we can hear, we can do other things, we have sight, and I respect all of those versions of technology. But in terms of you going to school to learn how to hear better, you going to school learning how to use your eyes better, going to school to learn how to use your other senses better in a non-recreational way, in a technological way, to either build civilization, to travel to space. NASA ain't teaching people how to go into your third eye to travel to Mars. They're not doing it. That would be an African thing to do. And I think people don't understand that. We're not talking about building a ship. Sure, Africans had sunboats. They even had designs of planes. That's all well and good, but it may not have been some type of permanent. It might have been a glider. I don't know. I'm speculating all on this. Yeah, debate me back. I'm not saying I even know it. I'm saying I'm thinking about it. And it's different than getting up here, doing some TED talk and saying this is fact. No, this is speculation. I'm a speculator and I own that. I have no problem putting my thoughts out there. They're on paper. You understand? That's my thought. That's my idea. Speculation. So let me finish speculating. So NASA's not doing that. Harvard or John Hopkins isn't teaching doctors how to help people meditate disease away. They're not teaching people how to use organic stones to help them treat Parkinson's and neurotic disorders. They're not doing that. You understand? They're building a device. They're teaching you electronics to do some type of physical external thing. You understand? That's the difference of what we're talking about. So we're not talking about building a hyperbaric chamber. No, we're talking about burning some roots, getting into a hut, and that becomes your chamber. You understand? But it's the things that those things come from. Africans and first world people built and created these organic things that this modern Western world are creating technologically to do. So I don't know if, I'm trying to make it make sense. Maybe if people ask me questions, maybe if I get into a debate with somebody, it'll help me produce a better explanation of it. I mean, I know there's people that totally get it, and they've been sending me messages. Shout out, I appreciate that. But there's still people, there's authors saying, yo, my book is that book. No, it's not. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about our robots versus their robots. That's not what we're talking about. We're not going to have robots. You understand? We're not going to have cars. You understand? We're not going to have spaceships. We're not going to have a lot of things. We're not going to have microscopes. Okay? But we're going to be able to do the things that microscopes do because we've done it before without microscopes. We're going to go to the planets. We're going to go back in time, whatever the heck. We're going to treat ADHD, all that stuff, without drugs, without creating a pill. So that's it. I just wanted to ramble a little on that today. Hopefully it adds on to what I was talking about the last post. Peace.